Jim Simpson is a friend of the program, goes way back. He was helping us with the Cloward-Piven strategy of manufactured crisis and overwhelmed the system back in the day. He's back. He's got a new book, Who Was Karl Marx? The Man, the Motives, and the Menace Behind Today's Rampaging American Left. He has worked under President Reagan, H.W. Bush, Clinton. He was in the Office of Management and Budget. He is a guy who has an awful lot of credibility and has been around and has, because he's an investigative journalist, actually knows how to tell the right story and get the facts right. Jim, good to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
Hey, Glenn. Great to be with you.
Thank you. So,
Thanks for having me.
Who was Karl Marx?
Yeah, who was Karl Marx? Well, he's made out to be this secular god that could never have done any wrong. But as I describe in the book, he is everything that he claimed to hate about all the people he was going to destroy with the communist revolution. He was a greedy, selfish, petty, arrogant, lazy, dishonest, two-faced, lecherous, bigoted, and he brimmed with hatred. He had all the ugly characteristics he attributed to others to excuse the destruction he and his followers intended to inflict on the world. He was deeply bigoted. He hated blacks. He favored slavery. He called the proletariat he was supposedly going to free from their chains stupid boys, rogues, asses. He spied for the German government on his communist friends for money. And despite the fact that his father was a wealthy attorney who showered money on him, he was perpetually broke and spent his life depending on small cash donations from his co-conspirator Friedrich Engels, who stole money out of his father's business petty cash account, and then spent the rest of his time hovering over ailing relatives, waiting for them to die so he could find out what he would get in their wills. This was the real guy. And it turns out he is typical. Mao Zedong was the same way. Bill Ayers was the same way. The Castro brothers were the same way. These are all impossibly arrogant, greedy, selfish men who believed they had the right to own the world. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. All they were driven by, really, was power and greed. And the Marxism, communism, is window dressing. It's the marketing plan to sell this monstrous ideology. That's what it is.
It is. When you actually learn about him, and a lot of this stuff wasn't known. A lot of the stuff was held back by the former Soviet Union and classified. And I think it was a Verona paper time that some of this stuff was released, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to expose it. But it's all factual information, because I think his wife said this should be preserved. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely, it's available today. In fact, a lot of my sources come right out of a website called Marxist.org. And it's simply amazing. And, there's still a lot of classified stuff about the Soviet communists and their various meetings. But Marx is just amazing, the truth about his life. 2 of his daughters committed suicide, a son-in-law, 3 of his children died of malnutrition while his wife was running around trying to raise enough money to get a coffin for one of their kids. Marx employed what one writer described as a loutish, libidinous, and otherwise useless secretary because he felt that a man of his stature needed to keep up appearances. I mean, it's simply amazing. It's simply amazing. And this is the guy that all the leftists, all those Antifa folks rioting out in the streets, claim to call their own secular God.
Do you get into his faith or lack of? I mean, there's
Yes.
there's evidence that he was a tortured guy and had said in his life, "I sold my soul to the devil."
Yep.
Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. So, they were ethnically Jewish family, but his father converted to Christianity, became a Lutheran so that he could continue to practice law in Lutheran-dominated Germany. And Marx was raised as a Christian and actually in high school wrote beautiful Christian poetry. It's really quite stunning. I quote it in the book. But when he went off to college, like we are all familiar with, he fell in with the wrong crowd. Some claim it was a Satanist crowd. Richard Wurmbrand, who was a Catholic priest who was tortured by his communist government. I believe he was Yugoslavian or Romanian, I forget. He wrote a book called Marx and Satan. And he quotes Marx's poetry after he made this conversion. Marx wasn't an atheist. He felt like he should be equal to God. And I quote a poem right at the beginning of my chapter on Marx that describes that, and it's really a paraphrase for Isaiah, where God describes Satan. I mean, it's really the same thing. Isaiah says, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High," talking about Satan. And Marx says, "I will wander godlike and victorious through the ruins of the world, and giving my words an active force, I will feel equal to the Creator." So Marx hated God. And I really believe actually most atheists, if they're honest, that's the truth. It's not that they don't believe, it's just that they can't imagine God would allow, all the things to happen that happen in the world, and that's their rationalization. But
I don't think from what I've read, I don't think Marx you could put him in that category of just can't believe that God would allow these things to happen.
Right.
He was an oppositional, oppositional force. He was.
Yes.
I think he actually believed in God and was trying to thwart him, taking the opposite positions.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. Absolutely blazing defiance. And that pretty much defines his life and his story. I mean, all of his friends describe him as a man, a destructive spirit whose heart was filled with hatred. One said, Engels said he rages without ceasing, as if 10,000 devils had caught him by the hair. Mikhail Bakunin, probably the most prominent anarchist, said one has to worship Marx in order to be loved by him. One has to at least fear him in order to be tolerated. Marx is extremely proud, up to dirt and madness. And this is the guy they founded their whole ideology on. I mean, it's crazy.
So, Jim, your book pretty much describes everything happening today as a result of, Karl Marx and further developed by his followers.
Yep.
But am I wrong saying that it is chaos and hatred is the main strategy?
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's really, although obviously you look at Antifa and BLM, these people express genuine hatred. I mean, it's hatred for things that literally do not exist. It's manufactured hatred. And some of them are foolish enough to actually believe it. But the strategy is basically intimidation. I call it psychological terrorism. And Lenin was the first one to really articulate that. He said, we need to write in a language that inspires hate, revulsion, and scorn towards those who disagree with us. Not towards those who are bad or wrong or anything, to those who disagree with us. And the whole point is to intimidate, marginalize, and as we're seeing, destroy the reputations and the lives of people who are articulate in pulling these guys' covers and showing who exactly they are. They go out to destroy them. And so people don't necessarily go along with this whole idea that, we're white supremacists, we're a racist society and all that, but they're afraid to say otherwise because they see what happens to those people who stand up to the left. And really, nobody wants to be in that position. Nobody wants to be excommunicated from their society, from their friends, from their neighbors, from their family even, losing jobs. It's literally a form of terrorism. And, it was started with Lenin, but it was carried forward through the Soviet Communist Party, telling communist parties of the world, call our opponents bigots, racists, call them anti-Semites, call them fascists and Nazis. And so they just keep repeating that, and over time, people start to actually believe it. And then it got brought forward by another hardcore communist who talked about white privilege. Noel Ignatieff, who was actually a Harvard professor. Even though he did not have the qualifications to be a Harvard professor, he became one anyway. Ask yourself how that happened. And he came up with the idea of white privilege. We have Herbert Marcuse, who deserves a book of his own, who came up with the concept of partisan tolerance. That is, tolerance only of the ideas from the left and complete intolerance right down to the level of thought of anybody who disagrees with them. And so this is where all this stuff came from. And then our favorite guy, Saul Alinsky, put it all together in a manual on how to destroy your enemies called Rules for Radicals.
I've been saying for a while, we are in a revolution, but only one side is recognizing it. And the rest of us are like, well, no, it's not that. It's right?
Right. Nobody wants to think of that because to do so really requires a whole change in our, not merely our perspective, but in our lives. I mean, we really have to get off the couch and really get to work because we are losing our country.
What does that mean? I know the longest chapter in the book is all about Václav Havel. That's one of the ideas in that chapter.
Yeah, I quote Havel later. One of my readers sent me an essay he wrote. I didn't actually know that he had said the same thing, but it's very important because his suggestion, he was the leader of Czechoslovakia after the Soviet Union, quote unquote, fell. He was the Czech Republic's first president, and he said the only way to circumvent the communism that is deeply entrenched in the culture and the society and the institutions, which is the same problem we have here, is to create a parallel society. And you create a parallel society that everybody will find preferable because what the communists set up is so horrific. Nobody wants to be part of it. They just don't have any options. But we have a very good opportunity here, especially in state and local government. We watch how the school boards are being overthrown, and of course how the national government comes in and says, well, we're going to declare those people domestic terrorists.
Right.
It's totally insane. But we have to provide those alternatives, and as we do, the votes and the money drain from the left and go back to freedom-loving America. And that's what we need to do, and that chapter describes at great length. It is the longest chapter with hundreds and hundreds of suggestions on ways to do that and the ways that we should behave. And a lot of it involves things that don't really require that we really change our lifestyle too much, because, most people just aren't going to do that. Most people aren't going to go out in the street and start fighting against Antifa. Most people aren't going to stand up to this massive cultural incursion that the left has successfully prosecuted over the last 100 years. So we need to figure out a way to work that harmonizes with our abilities and, as Saul Alinsky said, doesn't take us out of our comfort zone.
Jim, I'm going to pick your book up today. I'm going to begin to read it today. This is the kind of stuff that I have been looking for. I know your research. I know you know this inside and out, and this is more than just knowing where it all came from, which is really, really important to see how it was built. But I'm very interested in the solutions as well, because we better get moving quickly, or time will run out on us. Jim Simpson, the author of Who Was Karl Marx? The Man, the Motives, and the Menace Behind Today's Rampaging American Left. Who Was Karl Marx? Get it wherever books are sold today.